now.
77,000 barrels get tasted.
Correct.
Holy smokes.
So this whiskey that's brown, that's all from the oak. One of our whiskeys has made his top 100 every year since 2020.
No way.
Shared my whiskey with...
From South Bend to Evansville and everywhere in between, this is Get In, the show focused on the Hoosier State and the incredible stories happening here today. I'm Nate Spangle, founder of Get Indiana, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Today I'm joined by Bryan Smith, the master distiller at Nashville, Indiana's own Hard Truth Distillery. He's known for harnessing science and innovation to create best-selling flavors like cinnamon vodka, toasted coconut rum, and straight rye and bourbon whiskey. Hard Truth Distilling Company is Indiana's largest destination craft distillery, 325 wooded acres to be exact, featuring a full-service restaurant, tours, tasting center, outdoor amphitheater with live music. I was just down there a few weeks back, and it does not disappoint. They also distribute to 25 states currently and have plans to be in all 50 over the next 2 years. Today, we're going to be talking about why Indiana is a must-visit destination for whiskey lovers, Indiana's booming bourbon business, and dip into the science of distilling and a little bit of the history of Hard Truth and the come up over the last 9 years and the incredible journey there. Bryan, welcome to Get In.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Nate. I appreciate it.
Dude, after going down there just a little bit ago, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was blown away. And it's starting to turn into fall. It's not quite fall yet, but it's turning into fall in Nashville, Brown County. It's just like, wow, it was a heck of a time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's a fun place. It's very difficult to describe in words or pictures.
Well, and just like the explosive growth. Like I drove up there and it's huge. It's 325 acres total property, but like 28 of them, 30 of them are fully developed right now. Like there's so much room for growth. And I went on the ATV tour and the little tiki cruise around the little dude, it was so fun.
Yeah.
It was just a good time, good vibes all the way around. Yeah. But it hasn't always been like this. So first we're going to get into a little bit of the background, right? Like this massive distillery started in the top of a pizza restaurant 10 years ago, right?
Correct.
Kind of take us back to the beginning and where kind of Hard Truth got the start from.
Sure. Yeah. So my partners were very successful in the brewing industry with Quaffon Brewing Company. They learned that they could sell their beer and have success through brew pubs. And then all of a sudden, their brew pubs started becoming
when you think about brew pub versus brewery, what's the difference? Is a brew pub just serve food?
Yeah. So when I speak of brewery, I'm talking about the actual production facility. So it's really not a place where the public is welcome. Mm-hmm. But sometimes breweries have tasting rooms. Quaffon does not, but they're in Little Nashville. They opened up. Now it's called the Original, which is the little first brew pub, and that's where they were selling their beer. And then they started with the wings, the smoked wings, and the pulled pork nachos, and then that really captured a lot of people's hearts and minds, and
and stomachs.
Yeah, for sure. So then they started growing that business, and they're thoroughbred entrepreneurs, my partners. So they love opportunity, they grow on opportunity, and so as that business was growing, Quaffon Brewing Company, which was the original tenant above the pizza restaurant, they moved to their production facility where they are now. So it left this infrastructure and some brew equipment up there. At that same time, the laws in Indiana changed, allowing for, it was called the Indiana Artisan Distiller's Permit, which allows a co-location of a distillery if you have a brewery or a winery in good standing. So they, again, jumped through those hoops, said, we're just going to kind of figure this out as we go. And that's when I started with the company. I worked with Cole Smith, who was the first guy up in the distillery and helped put it all together. And he and I got up there and kind of knocked out the original iterations of what Hard Truth Distilling Company was going to be. So to my partners' credit, they kind of let me loose with
and just like from the product side, right? It's like what Hard Truth is what the product's gonna be. What's the liquid going in the glass? That's like what you guys were figuring out. What year is this?
So this would have been 2015.
2015. You're down there in Brown County, Nashville, just figuring it out.
Yeah, so it's an unusual story because really with the bourbon boom and everything that's going on with craft distilling, most upstart distilleries started with, a principal partner or somebody coming off from one of the big distillery operations and with a clear vision and a product, kind of like Angel's Envy, where Wes Henderson started out and he said, hey, this is what we're going to do. They got millions in investments. They built it. They did the thing,
Yeah.
Whereas
And coming from like, one of the big players, it's like you leave to go start your bourbon startup.
Yes. And so with us, it was more of a, we've got a track record of making good liquid, of, making good beer, offering a great customer experience at the brew pubs, great food. Let's see what we can do here.
It's going pretty well thus far, I would say. I think the level of success that Quaffon and the brewery has seen is really good,
Yes.
But I think that the level of success that Hard Truth has seen is almost like insane.
It's been an insane ride. It has been an insane ride.
You're only halfway to the entire country, so I can only wait in the world, right?
Yeah.
Because there's international distribution on some cruise lines and stuff already, right?
Yeah, we're in the Bahamas.
There's insane stuff going on, and we're gonna get into all of it. But we go back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there. You're in the upstairs spot of a pizza restaurant in Brown County, and where do you begin to be like, this is what a bourbon brand and company, where does it start?
So I think that the synergies of my partners and all the people involved to kind of put the thought together on what the brand was going to look like, the ethos of the brand was a very collaborative effort. As far as the liquid, they really gave me the reins I kind of raised my hand and said, hey, let me run with this. And for me personally, this was the culmination of a lot of things leading to this. So 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, was this possible, or would you be doing this? Absolutely not. But as I look back through the lens of time, and I talk about this a lot as I go around the country, there are a lot of things that led to this. My curiosity of science. I've always loved, first the time I learned about the scientific process and did, a science experiment in the 5th grade, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I'm super scientifically curious. And then my love and passion for creating flavors through food. I'm an only child, only grandchild. My grandmother, I was her pal in the kitchen. And so she was deconstructing her dishes and letting me try little ingredients and building my palate. I've got this incredible, insatiable love and passion for creating flavors for food. And then when I saw everyone's very visceral and emotional reactions to my grandmother's food, it absolutely changed my brain. And so ever since that moment, I have always pleased my family and my friends around me with food. And then my love of science. And then I grew up in Evansville, so had a experience making wine and beer with family and friends growing up. And so really there's a lot of things that kind of came together to this moment. It's like where preparation meets opportunity, right? So I was prepared for something I wasn't aware I was prepared for. And then I had this opportunity through these incredible entrepreneurs.
What were you originally hired at Quaffon? Because it was at Quaffon, right? That's where you were originally hired through, to just be like a brewer's assistant or something like that?
I just turned 40, and I was, I went to school at IU to be a recreation therapist. And so I was working in the field.
The path clearly makes sense from recreation therapist to master brewer
Distiller,
master distiller. Yeah.
It kind of does. If you think just the word recreation therapy, right? You put them together.
Right.
But I had always wanted to see what the inside of a brewery was like, right? So I talked to my wife and I was like, I'm 40. Seems like a good time to do something weird. What do you think about me hanging out in a brewery one day a week, just like washing kegs, right? So I had a friend who was selling beer for Quaffon. And she said, sure, whatever, get out of here. And I say that lovingly. She supported. It's been incredible support. But so I went just to literally see what the inside of a brewery was like one day a week. That was it.
See, that's something that I think, whether you're 40, 14, 21, whatever it is, that's a lesson that people, I don't know if enough people, put themselves in the place to get the opportunity. It's like,
Correct.
Go do this. Go spend a day. You're probably making $10 an hour or less or whatever. It's not about the money. It's about the experience.
Exactly $10 an hour.
How did I know,
you
right?
Nailed it.
It's like $10. You're literally probably what? And were you working 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, a full day.
Full
Yeah,
day. All right, so 8 hours. So,
Sure.
80 bucks a week.
Yeah.
Cleaning kegs, hanging out,
Yeah.
but getting yourself in the area. And now, like 10, that was 10 years ago?
Yeah, a little over 9 years ago.
Like, okay, 9 years ago, you're getting 1 day a week, $10 an hour, and now like master like that's crazy. That's an insane decade.
It is.
Okay, so you're washing kegs, and then how do you end up, being the person making the liquid?
Sure.
The juice, as some people in the industry say.
Yeah. So I always describe my time at the brewery as like, it was like a pirate ship, right? I mean, it's like everybody's kind of doing the damn thing, but it's a small crew of guys, and everybody kind of was doing everything. But I kept hearing about this, that they were bringing in a still, and I'm like, a still, and then they were telling me about the distilling license and this and that, and really piqued my interest. I had a really great friend from college, Jason Heiligenberg, who helped to start the distilling program down at Starlight Huber with Ted Huber many years ago. So I called Jason and I said, hey, can I come down and see what you guys are doing? And so I went down there, visited with him, spent a day with him. And then, I asked one of the partners, Tim O'Brien, I said, hey, Tim, would you mind if I go up and check out what you guys are doing with the distillery? He took me up there. I met Cole and Martin Gradoff at the time, who now Martin is at the distillery, our current distillery, basically running the show down there. I just was immediately fascinated. And then I started listening, and I'm like, wow, these guys really, I'm sure they're going to find something great, but there's not a clearly defined vision. And what I've learned is that, as I look back for whenever I create food, I have this unending kind of like bottomless motivation it's kind of like when you got a hobby that you're just obsessive about, right? So with me, creating flavors is that. So I just saw this opportunity and I thought, wonder if I could get in there and create something. But at the time, there wasn't any real investment money behind it other than just cash flow from the restaurant brewery. So it was step by step incrementally. But from the moment that, so then I asked them, I said, hey, instead of working here one day a week, can I go up to the distillery and help? At that point, Cole had done, I think, one malt whiskey wash. Basically, they call it a wash or distillation, wash and then distillation. And so they said, sure. So I went up there, and man, ever since then, I've been a man obsessed.
Oh,
absolutely.
So what was the first thing that you felt like you created? Like, what was the first thing that came out, and you're like, oh, was it good? Was it bad? What was it?
Sure. So like I said, Cole had taken, so because we have a brewery, we have a lot of malted barley. And so, malt whiskey or Scotch whiskey, single malts are essentially malted barley that you ferment, distill, and then age. And so far he had done one of those. It was interesting. They were doing some kind of flavored stuff, almost like a flavored moonshine kind of thing. I started researching what was happening in the craft space, and I found out that, really whiskey was where you wanted to be, but whiskey takes time. And so in the meantime, people typically will offer, they'll figure out how to make a good clean vodka, a white rum, a gin, and so those are things that you can basically from the grain to your finished product be done in under 2 weeks, right? Instead of 5 years for whiskey.
Right. Because this is the thing when people talk about going and starting a brand.
Yeah.
It takes years.
It does.
You're a startup. Like imagine whatever, you start a software company.
Right.
Great. Now you have your software, but you can't sell anything for 5 years.
Right.
Like, what do? You sit on your hands and wait? Like, you got to go out and that's where the spirits, right? The vodka and that stuff comes in.
Yes.
And that's kind of like how you guys, but now we're, I don't know how many years in, I feel like you guys are going to exponentially bring more to market because there's so much stuff in your rack house.
Yes.
Rack houses.
Yeah. So, really the first product that we took to market that was the one that really went into distribution just outside of our tasting room was our cinnamon vodka. And that was sort of kind of a happy accident in itself, but it really resonated with the people who were visiting the Big Woods location there in Nashville. And so really on that success, that's when the partners were, they had already always had in the mind that they wanted to to buy a big chunk of property and do something that incorporated the brewery and the restaurant experience. But then with the distilling coming in, they thought, well, we'll do all three. Then as the success of Hard Truth ramped up, then that became, this is going to be the campus of Hard Truth.
Tell me about those early years. And like, when did you guys know, like, oh, wow, we really got something here?
From the first product was cinnamon vodka to then we released a white rum. We released a gin. Every new product that we released, and I mean, it was like boom, boom. I mean, within like a few weeks of one another. Our fan base who were coming to visit at our tasting room down right below was growing exponentially.
So it was organic. It's just like people
very
coming in.
Organic. Absolutely. Yeah, it was very organic. And then, whenever the group decided to make the big leap and buy the 325 acres, then it was really, put to me, we've got this experience vision for what we're going to do on this property. What are you going to make? And so then it was like, okay. So that was a good, probably, 9 to 12 months of a lot of trips to Kentucky.
How many years in is this?
This was 1 year in.
Oh, so this is like 2016-ish.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like, so when did they get the property?
I believe it was at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So you're going out to Kentucky and being like, hey, like this is the mecca of, whiskey, bourbon, all the stuff. And it's like, go down there and learn what you can. And like, they're just letting you, come on in.
It is an amazing industry. So what I think was fascinating for me, the American whiskey industry, the bourbon industry, is massive. Right. I mean, it's huge. There are more barrels of whiskey in Kentucky than there are people. I mean, it's this massive industry with only a handful of people, really responsible for the making of this industry. And the great news is those people are, almost all of them are incredibly awesome people.
It's crazy when you go down and tour places and you're like, this is where all of the bottles of bourbon and whiskey in the world are like, not all, but a lot of them are created.
Right.
And it's like, in my head, I think like, assembly lines and automation stuff and all this. And it's like, it's not that crazy.
It's really not.
It's like pretty, like it's wood barrels stacked up and aging for years, and then you empty those out and then you put them into bottles.
I always say when people say, like, what's, oh, wow, I can't believe you. I'm like, man, all I do is I just screw around with corn, copper, and oak, and which really is pretty much, that's it.
This is the crazy piece too, that like I just picked up in the past like year maybe, and it's like, everyone like talks about the little palate wheel of like, oh, I'm getting notes of like a fruit. Like they're like, oh, it has citrus in it. And it's like, oh, so like the distillery, like they put citrus in it at the front. And it's like, no, there's 4 ingredients.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
It's like 4 grains, water, and a barrel.
That's it.
Right. Like it's crazy to me because I always thought like, oh, they must have like with beer, if you're gonna have like a citrus wheat ale, there's probably some like citrus in there that they, ferment and or not distill, but brew it with.
Right.
But with you guys, it's what? Corn, barley, wheat,
rye.
Mm-hmm. Those 4 grains.
That's it.
And some combination of those, like you and your evil scientist laboratory back there, create different liquids.
An American white oak. And that's it.
That is crazy to me.
It is.
Okay, so this is 2017, right around there. You have 325 acres, and we're gonna make it a must-visit experience destination.
Sure.
And it's your job to make it something that people can take home with them, right? Like what they're really coming there for.
Yes, there are a couple pivotal moments for me when I was in Kentucky that really formed a lot of the way that I thought about this. So kind of back to where we were talking about the friendliness of the industry. I got to meet Bill Samuels Jr., principal for Maker's Mark, and created that with his parents, and then him, and then now his son's running it. And Bill Samuels Jr., I mean, Maker's Mark is huge. It's just one of the classic worldwide bourbon whiskeys in the world. And Bill spent like 4 hours with us, and basically any
to help
question
his competition.
Yeah. Well, so here's what he said. He said the American whiskey, the dent that American whiskey has made worldwide, we've just scratched the surface. So the big brands are really working on international growth. And, he said anything that we can do to help other American whiskey makers make better whiskey makes us all better. It's kind of like, rising tide floats all boats.
You're growing the market. Like
Correct.
all of you together are chunking out this piece of spirit drinkers or like hard alcohol drinkers worldwide.
Right. And they don't want bad American whiskey out there. And then also on top of that, if you're in the whiskey industry and you're not somebody that can get along with other people and have fun, you're in the wrong industry. You know? So most of these people are just great people anyways. But that really stuck with me. And then really a formative moment was my visit to Wilderness Trail Distillery in Danville, Kentucky. So Shane Baker and Pat Heist, Dr. Pat Heist, two principal partners. They were kind of, Shane is a chemical engineer, and Pat is a molecular biologist, PhD. And so they had started a yeast company, and then they were consulting to help distilleries around the world to become more efficient. Then the bourbon boom started. They said, hey, we live in Danville. Let's start a distillery in Danville. Well, they didn't just start a distillery in Danville. They ended up building one of the largest producers of bourbon and rye whiskey, which Wilderness Trail just hit the shelves maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago now. So they've not really even been on the market that long.
I don't really know them.
Yeah, man, they're huge. So, but they were the ones where I went down to visit again. They spent an entire day with me. And by the way, they got acquired by another company just recently for $600 million.
Oof. Okay, yeah, that'll play.
That's right.
That'll play.
And it's because they're incredible. They make incredible liquid. They're super smart guys. But they've been very pivotal to help a lot of people grow. But the real key moment for me was they kept talking about sweet mash and sweet mashing as a style of making whiskey. Everybody's familiar with seeing sour mash on Jack Daniel's bottle and hearing about sour mash whiskey. It says it right on the Maker's Mark bottle as a technique of making whiskey. That term has been romanticized as this incredible way to make whiskey. It makes the best whiskey. I'm not going to argue with that. But Shane and Pat were talking about sweet mash, and they were talking about it from a biochemical standpoint and why it was superior, right? And so for me, it kind of sort of sounded like marketing at first. And then they took us to their rick house. And
can you give me the difference between a rick house and a rack house?
Yeah, so rick house is an actual structure inside the building where a barrel is on its side and rolls down the rick. A rack house is a barrel warehouse that has some sort of rack system that holds the barrels.
Vertical?
We do it vertical. A lot of other people also do it vertical, but there are also racks that hold it horizontal. Storing what ours is really considered a palletized rack house, so it's just easier to move the barrels around, safer for our employees. Ages the whiskey the same.
Got you. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So they took me into their rick house, and their oldest whiskey at the time was 2 years old. So they had nothing in the market, and Shane drilled a barrel of their oldest rye whiskey. It was only 2 years old, and let us taste it. It was a moment, I can still taste it. It was so incredibly complex, soft. It wasn't out of balance. So I'm a big balance guy. So I think of everything through my palate. So I like to create really interesting complexities, but you don't want things out of balance. I've never experienced that in any whiskey less than like 6 to 8 years old. And they weren't like cheating nature or advanced aging or, trying to do anything weird. It was just their process of mashing, going from a sweet mash to a sour mash, plus they're excellent whiskey makers.
When you talk sweet and sour, what's the difference?
So in the simplest terms, sweet mashing is a mash-in is basically cooking the grain. Okay, so that's the starting process of making whiskey. You cook grain into water. So with sweet mashing, in the simplest terms, you're starting with fresh water, fresh grain, and fresh yeast every single time you mash in.
So the consistency, the difference with sour mash would be you have stuff that's been doing this before?
Yeah. So the way that the sour mash has been romanticized is they kind of describe it like the sourdough mother, that's something alive that's been there for 200 some years. But that's really not the sour mash technique for making whiskey. Sour mashing in whiskey is they found in these bigger distilleries, and I won't get super technical, but they found in these bigger distilleries that they were having problems with bacterial contamination. So once you mash in and you've got this sweet cereal liquid, you throw yeast in it and it makes ethanol or alcohol, right?
Well, let's just go through the whole process real quick. Like
Yeah,
in the 100 or 10,000 feet view. So you start with, you have all the grains in there and the water.
Yep. So in the simplest whiskey making from soup to nuts is you have grains. So corn, like you described, corn. Usually for bourbon, it's got to be at least 51% corn. So corn, oftentimes rye, wheat, and malted barley. And so you take those grains, they're dried, right, like in a commodity form, and you grind them to flour, all the way down to flour. Then you mix those with hot water. And so when you mix them with hot water, all the starches from those grains go into solution. So now you've got this starchy solution.
Yes, chemistry words.
Yeah. Then you add malted barley. So you add malted barley because malted barley has a lot of enzymes in it. So the enzymes convert those starches to simple sugars. So if you think a starch is kind of like a big tree branch, and then those enzymes go in and cut that tree branch into little bitty chips. The yeast need that starch into little bitty chip form in order to eat it. So grind it up into flour, add your malted barley. Now you've got this really sweet cereal-y mash, they call it. Then you add yeast. The yeast go in, they consume those sugars, and they make 3 byproducts. They make ethanol, carbon dioxide, and heat. They also make some other flavor molecules that add to kind of like the nuances of whiskey making. But essentially, that's what you're doing. So then, or it's the same process as making beer or wine.
If you look down in like one of these giant vats, it's like, and the yeast has gone in, it's like, it's alive.
Oh, it's bubbling.
Like, it's like bubbling and, it's crazy. It's like, oh, is this boiling? And it's like, no, right?
Correct. That's
it's
the
just
carbon dioxide.
It's
That's
like eating it. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so it's similar to like when you make bread and the bread rises. Same thing. It's rising from the carbon dioxide bubbles. So it's the same process for making beer, essentially. So now you've made what they call distiller's beer, all right? So then all the alcohol you're going to make, you make in that fermentation process. So there it is, right? So now you're like, okay, what do I do with this? You put it into a still. All the still does, the still does not create any alcohol. It's just separating the alcohol away from everything else.
So this concoction, brewer's beer, mash, goes into the still and you start to heat it.
Correct.
And I did learn this when I was on my tour, right? Because alcohol has a lower boiling point than water?
Correct.
Question mark?
Yes.
So then it rises to the top and then you flash it with the water or the cold water that like takes it condensed. Yes. And then that's what comes out the other side as like alcoholic distillate.
Correct. Yeah. So that's what people think of. It's called a lot of different names: new make, white lightning, moonshine, whatever. But it's clear as water.
Yeah, it is intense.
It is very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then from there, in order to make, American style whiskeys like bourbon and rye whiskey, if you want to make a straight bourbon or a straight rye whiskey, the next step is to take that liquid and put it into a charred and for us also toasted white oak barrel. And so, what that does is then that whiskey goes in the barrel and then it sits in a rack house or rick house for, 4+ years, and there's no temperature control. So when it gets hot, that whiskey's hot and it pushes into that oak, pushes past the char into the toasted wood. Especially in white oak are a lot of wood sugars, a ton of wood sugars, literally sugar. When you char and toast those barrels, if you take a handful of white sugar and eat it, it doesn't really taste like anything. If you take that handful of white sugar and you put it in a pan and cook it, it turns into caramel, rich, buttery, butterscotchy. Same thing happens with this wood sugars in an oak barrel. When you char and toast that barrel, all those wood sugars get all this butterscotch, caramel, toast, smoke, mocha, all these kind of flavor compounds. Now you're putting whiskey or new make ethanol into this barrel. That ethanol, through the temperature getting cold and hot, is pushing literally into that wood.
It's a little flavor screen.
It's grabbing all that good wood sugar and it's bringing it back into the whiskey. So this whiskey that's brown, that's all from the oak.
That was mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
That it's like it comes out of the still and it looks like a vodka.
Sure
like it's
does.
just clear,
Right.
and it gets the color all from the barrel.
And a lot of flavor.
Yeah,
So,
which is wild.
So we work with our cooper to make very specific custom char toast barrels specifically to match our whiskey.
I love it. I mean, I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the science. Like, this is the piece that, like, as I've talked to people from Hard Truth and other distillers, it's like I think people just think it's like, oh, it's just people who like to drink or whatever. And it's like, no, it's like the nerd science people that also love to drink.
We could be on this podcast for about 3 weeks straight, 24/7, and we wouldn't get to the bottom of it.
Man, I love it. Yeah. Well, let's kind of like shift gear, right? So
Sure.
things start to like go well. You have the cinnamon vodka that's going well. You have the toasted coconut rum or the white rum that's going well. And then you get to the point where you have to, I mean, if you want to reap what you sow, you have to sow it 4 years to go.
Correct.
So when do you guys start to barrel some of your first whiskeys?
Spent a lot of time in Kentucky, formulated the plan. I pitched the plan to the partner group in a hotel room in Bardstown, Kentucky. They said yes. We contacted Vendome Copper and Brass Works. We got a still on order, which was very expensive. You saw all the copper there when you were there visiting.
What is like the startup cost for a still?
Oh boy, it's a lot.
Hundreds of thousands?
Oh no,
Millions?
lot more than that. Oh,
Holy smokers!
yeah. So Vendome Copper and Brass Works in Louisville, Kentucky, is the absolute gold standard, platinum standard worldwide for stills. So they make all the stills for Jack Daniel's, Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Hard Truth, right? And so there's a reason why, because they make the best, right? So put the deposit down on the still, started to design the property. My partners really took the experience portion and the restaurant portion of what that was going to be like and let me focus on the whiskey. And of course, obviously, we all collaborated on that as well, as far as the systems. But then we hired an engineer, in-house engineer, Clint Hammis, who we still have on board, Smarty Pants from Rose Holman. And so we started to build this. Took a little over a year and a half to build the actual system, and then commissioned that system October of 2018, made our first whiskey on the system. By that time, the tour center was open and giving tours, even though we didn't have still running yet. And then the restaurant had been launched. So we originally were going to do the distillery first and then add those other ones.
How were you making the cinnamon vodka and the other stuff?
The other distillery was still running.
Oh, the littler one.
Correct.
That was not the platinum standard.
Correct.
Okay, got you.
Yep. So that was still running, going hard. Cole and Martin were over there working their asses off. And then we were all deploying our energy toward building this new facility. Shane and Pat from Wilderness Trail consulted with us and helped us to design the inside of the system, which is great because those guys know exactly what they're doing. And then, of course, we put on our own touches on it. So we started distilling October 2018, and it's been off to the races since then. So now we've got about 11,000 barrels in the rack house
with huge expansion or huge addition plans coming forward, right?
Correct. As of October 1st this year, we're going to increase our production for ourselves fourfold.
Holy smoke! Because you're gonna put up new rack houses yearly.
We've got, I think, 2 more in the works, but we just built number 2 and number 3 in the last year and a half.
Holy smokes! Okay, so like there's big things coming, and it's like you have the supply now. So now it's making sure, like on the other side, it's like getting it all distributed and sold.
Right.
Because it's like, so you start that in 2018, but you don't get your first whiskey until 2022.
Yes, into 2021, we had a rye whiskey. One of our mash bills, our sweet mash rye. Rye, typically, the more rye. So when I say mash bill, that's essentially recipe. So it's the percentage of the grain. So our sweet mash rye mash bill, which is mostly rye, 94% rye. Rye is a grain that tends to get delicious a lot earlier. So a 3-year-old rye whiskey is not uncommon. It can be very, very, very good. So at the fall, very end of the fall of 2021, we released our sweet mash rye. and then the guy who is the biggest, most well-known whiskey reviewer, writer, everything.
Who's this guy?
Fred Minnick.
Fred Minnick,
Fred
baby.
Minnick picked up our sweet mash rye and called it the best first batch of whiskey from any distillery he's ever tasted in his career. And that was a big moment for us because Fred is he is internationally known, but he also is not a pay-to-play guy. I mean, I didn't try to pay him, but I tried to get his attention, sent him countless emails, tried to go drop whiskey off in his mailbox. I tried everything, and Fred was like, hey, look, thank you, but,
But chill out.
Just chill out, right?
Well,
so then he found our whiskey on his own, and since then, our whiskeys, at least one of our whiskeys have made his, he reviews about 900 whiskeys a year. And
Isn't that a job?
One of our whiskeys has made his top 100 every year since 2020.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that's a huge moment for us, and like I love you being a team player. What did that mean to you as the guy behind the liquid?
Well, I say us very purpose. It was tremendously satisfying. I don't operate with a whole lot of ego, so this is going to sound counterintuitive what I'm getting ready to say, but I knew what we had.
Hell yeah.
Because you don't do it, right? So here's the thing about me, and same thing with my food creation. My goal is never to, I'm never looking at the outcome. I'm never building something for a specific outcome because I know I've got partners who are doing the business part of things, right? They're like, hey, you just do the best version of what you do, right? So that's what I focus on. So when we released that final, the first release, I had countless hours of the planning. I mean, there's thousands of decisions that went into what was in that bottle, from the equipment, grains, water source, decisions, all the stuff, right? Not only that, but then I've tasted, before we've got 11,000 barrels in the rick house. I taste every one of them probably 7 times before they're ever released.
Every barrel?
Every barrel.
You have 11,000 barrels.
Yeah.
And you've had...
So I've got help now.
77,000 barrels get tasted.
Correct.
Holy smokes.
And I've got a lot of help now, but my point is,
if
we're
anyone's
not
looking for
just
an
kind of like
internship.
saying like, hey, let's see how this goes, right? By the time it goes into this bottle, I am telling you, this is the best I have to offer. And so what I do have confidence in is through my many years of doing other stuff with food and flavors and all that is that if I'm satisfied with it, I'm probably going to hit most people's palate in the way that they're going to like.
It's like an artist, right? Like
it's very art.
You know that it's good, and it's like whether or not the big reviewer or whoever. It's like, and that's why it's also impressive because it's everyone's palate is a little bit different, you know. And so it's like, man, if you just happen there are probably really good distillers out there that Frank, is that his name? Fred?
Fred.
That like just don't hit Fred's palate right.
Oh yeah, and some of our whiskey doesn't hit his palate right, and so we've got a wide portfolio of whiskey, and I very purposefully designed those mash bills to pull the flavors from all the way over here to all the way over here and everything in the middle. All of them delight me, but they're not all for everybody. And also with whiskey tasting, for people that maybe are listening to this that aren't used to tasting whiskey neat or, nothing in the glass, just the glass and the whiskey. It's a very jolting experience for your palate, right? It's not, you got to work at it. It's kind of like getting to know coffee or getting to know wine.
So you get that Southern Indiana hug.
Yeah, man, there you go. I like that. I like the change in the, but it, it really is something to where, you're going to hit people's palate differently, and that's okay because my goal is to make the best thing that I can make. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what I always stay focused on. Cause if I start putting my focus on chasing trends or trying to hit this one reviewer or whatever, I'm going to screw it all up.
Hey everyone, quick pause in the action to introduce you to Flutterman Von Riest, a true hidden gem in Indiana, especially for all you watch aficionados out there. Founded by an Indiana State graduate from Batesville, this family-owned brand has deep Hoosier roots dating back to the 1830s. They are even proud members of the Society of Indiana Pioneers, which I didn't know existed but is a sweet organization. They are based in Indy and are redefining luxury watches. Meticulously crafted in Kokomo by a certified watchmaker and his apprentice, the designs blend classic elegance with a modern twist. Plus, they offer exclusive limited editions and are rolling out an exciting Watchtoberfest promotion this fall. Don't miss their Chase Briscoe Race Day VIP Experience giveaway, an incredible opportunity for race fans. Chase is an awesome NASCAR driver from Mitchell, Indiana. You're going to be learning more about him soon. Follow Flutterman Von Riest to explore their stunning collections and join their journey to greatness. Yeah, you just have to, like, it's the process, right? It's like you, and it's so clear just from hearing you talk, how just like in love with the process of making whiskey and bourbon and spirits and like the flavors. Like that's what you get pumped up about. I can just tell.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a dream.
Yeah, and it's like this is what you do for a living. This is your job.
It's unbelievable.
Like I get to interview people and be curious for a living, and it's like this is crazy, right?
Yeah. And curiosity is a big part of this too.
Like trying different things, and like I'm sure there are multiple times where it's like you put a mash bill together or whatever, and it comes out, and you're just like, yep, that probably ain't it. You know, like it takes a lot of trial error chemistry trying to get into this bottle. I think that's like what people need to remember.
For sure. And just another little kind of inside baseball that's really fun is that the more that you're into it, the more I can, like the more experience that I have, the more I can experiment with mash bills and flavor profiles in my head before they're ever made, because I understand the flavor components and what they bring to it, right?
It's kind of like you're simulating it in there. Like if we do that and that's going to taste pretty close to
I can taste it.
You can taste it without it ever actually. Yes. That's great. That's so cool. That's just being a master of your craft.
And then back to the we, because when you said, you use the word we, but being the director of the creativity is one thing. But then once you get to the scale that we're getting to, and then everyone's jobs start to change, and now that we're moving out into multiple states, my job is to come and do this kind of thing, but I do it all over the country. I'm going to New Jersey next week, launched Texas last year, and so I'm doing a lot of this. The team that we have assembled, some people have been there longer than me, even just within the organization, are absolutely as passionate as I am or more in what they do, and they are super talented. That distillery is running far better with the people who are running the day-to-day than I could ever do it, for sure.
I think
they get the credit.
I love that. And I think that's what, and a lot of times with business or anything, it's like what got you here won't get you there.
Right.
And it's like getting award-winning early stage, like the startup grind. You're literally figuring out what's gonna like help grow this, but then you got to figure out how to operationalize, streamline. Like if you're gonna, what'd you say? Over the next 5 years, how much you guys growing your production by?
Yeah, well, so by next month we're going to be making 4 times the amount of barrels. So which will satisfy this national footprint, because there's a lot of, for people out there who are whiskey fans, or even if you're not. It's kind of like what happened with craft beer. There used to be like 6 beers on the shelf, and then all of a sudden there were 160 beers on the shelf, and you're like, what's going on here? Same thing's happening with American whiskeys. There used to be a very small bourbon section.
One hand, right?
Yeah, now it's like insane. So in order to push through that morass as a brand, first of all, authenticity. We are grain to glass, right? There are a lot of brands on the shelf that borrow other people's whiskey. I call it borrow, but they just buy barrels that somebody else made, come up with a cool brand, get a bunch of.
They're a marketing company.
And that's fine. There are some great whiskeys out there, not downing them. We are going to push through because Doug Miller, Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt grow our grains.
Doug Miller and
Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt.
Yes.
And then, Travis. And we've got farmers on the front end that grow our grains, farmers on the back end that take the spent mash.
Who are the farmers from?
So one of our farmers that grows some of our rye is from Mount Vernon, Indiana. Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt, he's actually an anesthesiologist. He's tried to retire like 3 times, and he's got a little distillery called Dusty Barn Distillery. If you're ever in Mount Vernon, definitely go down and see
Mount
him.
Vernon, like down by
Indiana,
Evansville?
Down by Evansville.
Yeah, okay, Posey County.
Yeah, and Dwayne's a trip. He's awesome. And then Doug Miller is a 6th generation corn farmer from Rush County. He's got farms in Rush County and Brown County. And his sons have businesses around Bloomington. So we got to know them through their other businesses, but 6th generation corn farmer. And then we've got farmers on the back end that take the grain and feed cattle and have a cattle operation. We're building the next heritage American whiskey brand. We're not building this to jump on this bourbon trend and sell out. You know what I mean? We're doing this because we believe that what we're building is a lasting thing, and because we love doing it.
And,
right?
and you guys, I think that's important for listeners to know is there are great local brands that do cool things.
Yeah.
But like Hard Truth is going out to compete on a national and international stage.
Absolutely.
Like when you say heritage American brand, like there are a few gentlemen's names that are on glasses or bottles of whiskey all around the world.
Right.
Like that's where Hard Truth is going and is already well on the pathway there. 25 states, the other 25 coming in the next 2 years. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
So I think like the scope of where you guys are, it's like, oh yeah, they're like a local Indiana, like they are local and they are built here in Indiana, and the the corn is raised or grown in
Yeah.
The corn is grown in Rush County,
Yeah.
but like this is distributed very, very far.
Right. So it's kind of always that we're doing both things, right? It's almost, and this is what I always tell, like whenever I talk, because it's interesting trying to build our brand in Indiana sometimes is a little bit even more difficult because people view us as a local brand and they're like, it's just local. You know, it's some people love the local thing and other people are like, it's kind of a little local brand. I'm going to get my maker's mark. Right. But what I try to impress on folks whenever we're, trying to get placements behind bars, restaurants, liquor store shelves is I'm like, guys, this is us. You are, like bars and restaurants in Indiana, you are part of Hard Truth. This is a story that we're taking to the country. I want everyone here in Indiana, Hoosierland, to feel the same pride that I feel. I'm Evansville born and raised. I'm Hoosier through and through. Our farmers are Hoosiers. People that work at the distillery are Hoosiers. We're authentic grain to glass. We are building, something that's going to represent Indiana in an incredible way from coast to coast and, eventually internationally.
Yeah.
And so I want everybody to feel that pride, right?
When people think like Lynchburg, Tennessee, or like Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky, like you're going to be thinking Nashville, Indiana.
Yes.
Like that's so cool to me.
Yes.
And I do want to dip into that just a little bit, and I have some fun kind of segments here at the end.
Cool.
When you think of bourbon, you think of Kentucky. When you think of whiskey, like you don't necessarily, the world doesn't think of Indiana. How are you using that to you guys' benefit? And how, like, it's probably easier,
right,
to like go move down to Kentucky and build a distillery there. It's like I think the commitment to Indiana is impressive, and I love it. It's obviously the shtick, but like I just want to know about that process and how this can actually end up being a net win for you guys because you are different and you are in Indiana.
A good deal of the corn that ends up in Kentucky bourbon is grown in Indiana.
You hear that?
There's absolutely no way around that. And then for the people out there who kind of are in the know, there used to be this little kind of mystery that no one really knew about or people weren't talking about. And then all of a sudden now, if you're in the whiskey world, it's out in the open. Everybody knows about it. And it's now kind of celebrated. It's a little distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana by the name of, now it's Ross and Squibb, but it's been known as MGP. Before that, it was Seagram's. So if you ever go down to Lawrenceburg, Indiana, as you're getting ready to go across the river, you'll see this big, kind of industrial complex on the left, old red brick, and a big steam tower, and it says Seagram's on it. That's where all the Seagram's gin was and is made still. But that distillery it's kind of bought and sold multiple times over the years. And in fact, it was featured in Peaky Blinders There's one of the big players that talked about this distillery that they were running whiskey out of. That came out during Prohibition because they still had one of those medicinal whiskey licenses.
Medicinal.
That was a real thing.
We live in a constant cycle of the same thing, right?
It's right. I know, it's crazy.
Okay.
So anyways, MGP has been making this gigantic volume of whiskey for the last 20 years, and it built a lot of brands that are Kentucky heritage brands now on the backs of their whiskey.
Is there like rack houses and all this stuff down there?
It's huge. It's huge. But they never had their own brands. They would make whiskey and sell it to other people to make their own brands. So I could name off a bunch, but I'll just pick one. Bullet Bourbon, Bullet Rye. Both those whiskeys from Kentucky Frontier Whiskey were all made in Indiana. Now, they built their own distilleries, and now they're starting to use their own whiskey. Yeah, so for a while, that was kind of like the dirty little secret. Now everybody knows MGP makes great whiskey.
See, and I think the other the secret is that I think I grew up thinking if you wanted to be a bourbon, you had to be made in Kentucky.
Yeah, they've been telling that.
That's like a pretty good
they've been
marketing
telling that for a while.
It is. But it's 51% corn is what makes it a bourbon.
Correct. But going back to your Indiana thing, so the reality is there has been this incredible, for the last 20 years, some of the best bourbon and rye whiskey made in the United States has been made in Indiana. Now it's out in the open. Now everybody knows about it. MGP recently was just purchased and acquired. So now there's some brands that are being run out of there. But it's kind of out in the open now that Indiana is and has been making some of the, if not the best bourbon and rye whiskey in this country for a good piece now. And then now we are all growing. So there are, there's Starlight down near Louisville. There's Spirits French Lick. There's a new one called Old Homestead. There's Cardinal Spirits. There's Hotel Tango. There's West Fork. There's Four Fingers. There's I'm going to miss a bunch. 18th Street. They're all great friends of mine. Old 55. There's this gigantic boom of Indiana craft distilleries that are popping up, and they are all making tremendously good whiskey. So, and the industry is definitely taking a look at it and talking about it. And so Hard Truth definitely is proud to be kind of at the forefront of that.
Yeah. I think that's super interesting to think about, right? And I love, it's this classic Hoosier humbleness, right? It's like we're making all this great whiskey, but we're just giving Kentucky all the credit, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so when you think about the future, let's kind of like what's on the horizon? I mean, you've been here almost a decade now at Hard Truth. You've been growing like crazy.
Yeah.
What's the next decade look like?
For us, so we've got our 5, sweet mash grain to glass whiskeys, kind of our core whiskeys, 2 ryes and 3 bourbons out in the market. Got a lot of things up these little small sleeves here for the future as far as releases. But really, it's a matter of, when you look at that, like I said, all those whiskeys on the shelf and all that bar space that's still occupied by. Because another thing that a lot of people don't know is most of the whiskeys that they view as Kentucky whiskeys or whatever whiskeys that have been around forever, most of them are owned by about 5 international hundreds of billions of dollars corporations that came in and bought them all up. The power that they have to get those placements behind the bars and to get distribution on the shelves of liquor stores it's difficult. It's definitely a David and Goliath kind of thing.
Yeah, you're like already like fighting with one hand behind your back a little bit there.
It's unbelievable. So really the next 10 years is doing the hard work, grinding it out with our distributors. We're still every dollar that has been realized through Hard Truth is being reinvested in sales and distribution. I mean, nobody's gotten cut a check. It is all going back in. So the next 10 years is really doing the hard work. I'm going out, our sales force is going out, the other partners are going out, and we are doing the hard work to build this brand. It just, I would love to say that because the liquid stands out and everyone loves it, that's going to be enough. It's not. It's just like anything else in America. If you want if you want to get to where you're going, you have to grind. So the next 10 years is grinding.
And it's a little bit different, right? It's like you kind of like hit that early startup phase. It's like, this is the thing. Like we got something here.
Right.
Now we got to make sure everyone knows what we got, right?
That's
And you
it.
have to like go blow it up and like, get it in all 50 states behind every bar. So people are drinking Hard Truth and Coke.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm not also, you don't know me. I'm not precious. You can drink my whiskey however you want to, man. I grew up drinking whiskey and ginger ale on ice. I still love it.
A little whiskey ginger ale.
I mean, I go to all these stuffy things and everybody's talking about notes of, lavender and spanked leather and tobacco, and I'm like, all right, can I get some ginger ale?
Yeah, just a little bit. Come on. I love it. And I think that it's important for Hoosiers to know, like what, when they're in the liquor store or they're at the bar and like, you're buying it already, right? It's like
Right.
it's whiskey, it's bourbon, like there's some differences there, but it's like this is a brand that is like on the rise doing big things.
Yeah.
And when you like get away from one of those, larger conglomerate corporation brands and like pick something like a Hard Truth, like you're helping fuel this bourbon economy in Indiana and helping like that grow and like what you're doing, like you just gave 10 shout outs to like what people would think of as your competitors, right? Like the West Forks and the Four Finger, like, but it's like
great people.
Yeah, great. And you're doing the same thing that I'm sure was done for you where you went down and like met with all those guys. Like I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And also, I think that the big change I think that's hard to push through locally is that sometimes people think, I probably ought to buy that. It's local. I want to buy it because of that. I don't want you to buy it because of that. I want you to buy it because it's really, really good. So what I think sometimes people are hesitant because they are like, I want to buy the real deal, the good stuff, right? But when you're local, that's kind of some of the stuff that we fight against. Whereas when I go to Texas with Hard Truth, we're not something that they've seen before. And so they're like, hey, what's going on there? Then they read about us, then they drink the liquid. I mean, I've got people in Texas that are like clamoring for as much Hard Truth as I can get them because they're like, this is the best whiskey we've tasted that's come out of the American market in forever. We're not fighting against the fact that it's them thinking they're just trying to help out the look. So it's an interesting, kind of an interesting challenge.
I wouldn't think about that from like at the beginning, but it's like, like drink it because it's good. And we also local.
Yes.
Right. And it's like you're out there competing with the best. Like when you think of like, I love that. I think that's super important for people to know. And I also like subtle plug to go down to the distillery and check it out.
It's
and
crazy.
Do the UTV tour, do the boat tiki tour, like do the distillery tour, stay in the cabin. It's phenomenal. Like I had so much fun.
Yeah.
It was a really good, and it was like a Thursday. Like we weren't even getting like wild, like that concert venue. Like you guys can pack that thing out. And you have Harvest Fest coming up, right?
Yes. Harvest Fest coming up, which is going to be awesome. We're releasing the third of our collaboration with Mellencamp Whiskey Company. It's a great whiskey, by the way. I mean, I love working with those guys. It's going to be an awesome party, but to give people an idea, we have over 400,000 people visit our distillery a year. The experience that we built there is that, and that's my partner's vision. I'll not take zero credit for that because I don't have that kind of vision. The experience that we built there was also based on them going down to Kentucky, them doing all these distillery tours and saying, hey, these kind of all are the same. Like they're great. They're historic. Everybody should do them. But after you go on so many of them, it's kind of like, So in Indiana, we didn't have the same kind of restrictions that a lot of the dry counties that those distilleries are located in have.
That's crazy to me that they're
Yeah. And then they had their experience with the brewery and the restaurants. And so their minds, they just went totally, outside the box. We weren't confined to any kind of paradigm because we don't have a 200-year history. We are creating a new tradition, right? And so when you come to the distillery, if you have in your mind what you think a distillery is going to be like, or you're like, maybe one day me and the guys will go there, or maybe one day my wife and I'll go there. I mean, bring your kids. It's kind of almost what Napa did with the winery experience, where we are family friendly. Now the tours, it's 21 and over. Just by law, but with the walking trails around all the lakes, we've got this big outdoor amphitheater area. It's very kid friendly. Lots of good. Even if you're not a drinker, it's a great place to go. So we really kind of blew up the idea of what a distillery experience was like. Obviously, Brown County's gorgeous, and it's kicking the pants. And in fact, I will tell you this: we have seen a lot of our Kentucky friends, in the dark glasses with the fake noses and stuff coming through, doing tours, and a lot of the tours are starting to change in Kentucky. So I'm not saying it's because of us, but I'm just saying, I think blowing up the paradigm is.
I think that we need to maybe get a party bus or something and get our own like Indiana tour or Indiana Trail.
Absolutely.
Just start ripping through all the different distilleries.
There's been a lot of talk about that. There have been multiple kind of starts and stops on how to do an Indiana Distillery Trail. There is an Indiana Distillery Trail.com, I believe, already, and so it's kind of like we're in such an infancy phase with all this explosive growth with distilleries. Everybody's doing so much work trying to build their business that it's difficult to get like kind of a plan. Nobody has time.
I feel that. Yeah, because you're trying to go take over the world,
right?
The bourbon world.
Right.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end, and I have some fun, interesting questions. I think and we're just gonna loosen up a little bit.
Cool.
The first one being, it's like a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
Who is like the coolest or most famous or person that's tried besides Fred? Who's like the coolest person that's like tried your whiskey, your bourbon, your product and like loved it? That you were like, man, that's pretty cool.
We did this collaboration with Mellencamp Whiskey Company. One of the principals at Hud Mellencamp. He was asked to be on a show recently, an ABC show called Claim to Fame. So he was on Claim to Fame season 3, which the conceit of the show is everybody has a famous relative. It's like a reality show, so they're trying to figure out who's each other's relative is. And so I found myself randomly invited last Tuesday to Nashville, Tennessee, for the finale part, the ABC finale party. And so I shared my whiskey with Trace Adkins and John Mellencamp was there. But then also some of the cast members, which was Marlon Brando's grandson. And so I would say that night was, John Cryer's niece. Let's see. There's Mark Anthony's nephew.
I love it. It's Mark Anthony's nephew.
So there have been definitely some big whiskey people and some big, like, kind of very important mentors in my life. That have tried and loved our whiskey that certainly mean, a lot more. But I'm trying to go to my most recent memory.
I mean, Trace Adkins drinking your whiskey is pretty sick.
Yeah, that was kind of a trip. I was sitting there and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. This is an interesting night.
Who would have thought 9 years ago, you're like going, sweetheart, like I'm just going to work 1 day a week in the brewery.
Yeah.
Like it's just 1 day.
Partying with Marlon Brando's grandson.
With Marlon. I love that. That's so fun. Okay, this segment is our younger years segment. You're going to give a little guidance to those that are coming up and figuring out what they're doing.
Sure.
This question is brought to you by our friends at Or Fellowship. They're a great organization here in Indiana, helping develop young business leaders across the state. Bryan, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
Continue to I never had a problem of fostering the things that I was passionate about that didn't do anything for me vocationally. So it's really kind of like an anti-suggestion, but I loved spending way too much money on all kinds of crazy ingredients and cooking a ton of really awesome food for my friends. I've got an aunt who's Japanese, so I cook a bunch of Japanese food, cook a bunch of this. And, whoever I was dating at the time or, girlfriends or friends, they'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you spending all this time? I'm like, because I love it. Right. So my advice to my 22-year-old self is keep doing that stuff. Don't lose it because passion that's everything. Right. So, if you can figure out a way to weave passion into, to success for you from a business standpoint, for me, none of this has been a struggle. There's always difficult times and hard things that we have to work through from a business perspective. But when you got passion, the winds of passion at your back.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Of like, you wouldn't be where you are today without the passion, but it was when you were 40.
Correct.
Right? Like, it wasn't like you were 22, 23, like, oh, I'm going to make cooking or this flavor. Like, I'm in the business. You're Guy Fieri in the business of Flavor Town, right? Like, it wasn't always like that. But the right opportunity struck and crossed segments with passion, and now here you are.
Yeah, I'd worked in restaurants, whenever I was younger, and I can't tell you, at least 100 times someone said to me, "Oh my God, you should open a restaurant." And I said, "Absolutely not." Are you crazy? Have you ever worked in a restaurant? I'm not a person that likes chaos. So, so that's the nice thing about distilling is it's very predictable. So, I would say that even though I knew that it wasn't something that I was going to ever do, it was what I was passionate about. So I kept it alive. I didn't let it die. So just whatever you're passionate about, keep it alive. And, it's my partner, Jeff, always says, luck is where opportunity meets preparation. So when all of a sudden there was an opportunity in front of me and I was like, oh, wait, I'm prepared for this. And I didn't even know it.
Heck yeah. I love that. All right, now we're going to get to the lightning round. So we're like, quick hitters. We're going to bust through some questions really quick. You got into whiskey. What was the drink you'd had?
Bourbon and ginger ale. And we called it, at the time we used George Dickel, and we called it the Dickel Tickle.
So if you're just getting in, try a little tickle.
That's right. Yeah.
There we go. So name a whiskey you think everyone should try at least once. You can give us a hard truth or and like a brand out there that you're just like, I really like what they do.
Sure. Hard Truth Sweet Mash Rye and Wilderness Trail bottled in bond 6-year-old rye whiskey.
Ooh, okay.
Yep.
The 6-year-old bottled in bond. What do you love about that one?
You will never taste anything like it.
Okay. All right. I'm game. Yep. I'm all in on that.
Yep.
What's your favorite whiskey and food pairing?
So I did an event in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which if you've not been there, I had no idea how awesome that little town is. And there is a chef there named Dwayne Schaff, and he's got a place called Celebrations. He put together, I've done a bunch of these whiskey and food pairings where, I come in and then the chef does some, compare, and they always do it with cocktails. Dwayne is brilliant enough to where he paired a neat pour of whiskey with 5 different courses. Each course, he had the whiskey replace some sort of element that was needed for the dish. So if it was a rye whiskey, it was like the peppery element in the dish. And so it was really meant to drink them together, and the guts that it takes to pull something off like that. So I would say my recommendation would be to go to Celebrations in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and eat Dwayne's food and ask him to suggest a Hard Truth whiskey pairing with one of his dishes.
Love that. All right. Yep. Celebrations in
Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
All right. Okay, this leads us to, we're going to talk Indiana, though.
Okay.
Besides Hard Truth down at Distillery, best place to grab a drink in Indiana?
Moe's House in Evansville.
Oh, what's Moe's House?
So Mariah Rose opened up a bar. She's got one in Henderson, Kentucky, too. But it's down off of Parrott Street in like Haney's Corner area in old downtown Evansville, Indiana. And it might be the best old-fashioned I've ever had.
Heck, that's saying something.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. And what's the oldest bottle of whiskey you've ever tasted?
So there's a couple places in Louisville that are known for, they call them Dusties. It's a good question. It was an Old Forester. It was a really, really, really old Forester. I don't remember the year, but it was like from the 40s or something.
Oh my.
Yeah.
All right. What's the most expensive whiskey you've ever tried?
Birthday bourbon. I have had Pappy Van Winkle before.
Wait, what is that a pour?
What's that?
Like what's that? What's the price tag on one?
Well, so that's what's interesting about these expensive whiskeys is that the retail price is really not that expensive on a lot of them. But it's the secondary market drives the price up. So
because there's only so many of them.
Correct. Yeah, but the best expensive pour I ever had probably was Weller 12, and I don't get crazy about all the Buffalo Trace stuff, but Weller 12 is legit.
All right, last kind of fun question. Then we have our 3 ones that I do every time.
Sure.
Where did the name Hard Truth come from?
one of my partners, Jeff McCabe and Ed Ryan, they were going back and forth on what the name of the distillery brand was going to be. And Jeff was on his way down to visit his mother in Florida and saw a billboard, and it was one of those accident attorney billboards. And it was an ex-NFL star, and he has fists like this, and he was crushing a semi-trailer. And it was like, it's like hurt in an accident, or, kind of one of those things. But all it said was and that's the hard truth. And Jeff pulled his car over, got on the phone to Ed, and was like, Ed, get with the attorneys, see if hard truth has been trademarked. It was not. They came up with a product to show proof of use quickly. They put it on a bottle. They submitted it, and we got it.
No way! From one of those posters. I wonder who the NFL player was.
Jeff could tell you. Everybody knows Jeff, because if you go on our property, you're going to meet at least Jeff or Jim Dunbar, one of the other partners, around. And it's funny. Everywhere I go, somebody's like, "Hey, I met the owner of your place," and I was like, "Guy with cool hair." They're like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "That's Jeff."
I love that. Hard truth.
Oh yeah,
that's so fun. Yeah. All right, well, here are our always the same lightning round questions. We got 3 of them for you.
All right.
We're going to start with, what's something the world needs to know about Indiana?
You should explore the beautiful, deep hardwood forests of southern Indiana. I've been all around the country, not all around the world, but a lot of places in the world. I love beautiful nature kind of spots. That's my jam. And I always go explore places. I'm like, oh my God, this place is incredible. And then I go down to Hoosier National Forest and I take a hike, and I'm standing in groves of, 80, 90 foot oak trees. And just the feeling when you're inside these deep hardwood forests in Indiana is unlike anywhere else.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. What is a hidden gem in Indiana?
One of my favorite little spots to go hike is Hemlock Cliffs. So it's down it's if you look at Hoosier National Forest on a map, there's a few spots that are kind of broken up. So it's on the way south, like if you're heading down towards Corydon, Indiana. And it's like Indiana's own little box canyon. And it's this cool little geographic place. And if you go there in the late summer, early fall, there's just like these crazy mushrooms that grow everywhere. Like just ones that you normally don't find in Indiana. Beautiful hike. Definitely go check it out.
What was it? Hemlock?
Hemlock Cliffs.
Hemlock Cliffs. I love it. I haven't heard that one yet either. It's good. Final question. Who's a Hoosier that we need to keep on our radar? Someone who's doing big things.
My buddy Alan Bishop.
What's Alan Bishop doing?
So Alan Bishop is the first distiller at Spirits of French Lick, and he helped develop their program. He just started with a group of partners, Old Homestead Distillery. They just started distilling. But Alan is a really, really, first of all, he's an awesome dude, but he's a historian on, he loves to really dig deep into the history of distilling in the state of Indiana. He has forgotten more than I'll ever know about it. The little area down kind of around the 64 corridor is known as the Black Forest of Indiana, because a lot of German settlers that came from the Black Forest settled there because it reminded them of home. And so there was a lot of apple brandy being made. There were a lot of spirits being distilled. One of the things that Alan always says I love is that if you have ghosts, you have everything. And he'll tell you stories about all this history, and he makes incredible spirits. He makes absinthe. He makes great whiskey. Alan's great. Look him up.
All right, I love that, Alan. Final. I guess I just thought of this one.
Okay.
Final thing. Take us out. When it comes to Hard Truth and all the awards and everything that you guys have made, what's the one thing you're most proud of?
The thing that I'm the most proud of personally is the community of people that we've built. I call them our family of I don't want to refer to them as employees, but the community of passionate artists and makers that we've found and kept together as family, care as much about what we're building as we do. And this includes our farmers and everybody on our property, but the folks working with us, because without people really believing in where you're going, you've just got employees, and in order to build something great, you have to have people that really believe in where you're going.
I love that.
Yep.
I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thanks, buddy.
I believe in you. And I think the best is yet to come when it comes to everything with Hard Truth. This is a subtle plug to all the listeners. Make sure you make it down to the distillery. Just pack up this weekend. Go do it. It is worth the time. The food's phenomenal, especially if you check out the event kind of calendar, like the venue, the stage, and it's humongous.
It's crazy.
I can't even put it into words how big and how many people could fit back there for a concert. So go check it out.
Real easy to find, hardtruth.com. And then also ask if you got a favorite watering hole, bar, restaurant, ask them for some Hard Truth sweet mash whiskeys.
Yes.
People asking, customers asking to bring in our product is infinitely more impactful than me going in and trying to sell it in. So if you like Hard Truth, ask for it at your local place.
Yes, go to your local place. Yeah. Tell them to put some Hard Truth on the shelf.
Yes, sir.
I love it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Get In. If you liked what you heard, make sure you leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This show was made possible by our friends up at Sweetwater. Whether you're trying to start your own podcast or looking to take your show to the next level, make sure you check out sweetwater.com for all your creator needs. If you want exclusive behind-the-scenes content on all things Indiana, make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nate Spangle. Thank you for being part of what makes the Hoosier State so amazing. We'll see you next week here on Get In.